It's tea time. Cheers. All right, 3 things that I want to talk about today. First of all, I am Patricia Moore, and I come on here week to week to spill the tea. Listen, normally spilling the tea is associated with something negative because it's associated with gossip. It's spreading the bad news about some situation or somebody. My tea is about spreading the good news because we know everything that the devil stole. What? We take it back as believers, as Christians, and we make it for the glory of God. So this tea, if you can think about it on a cold day, it's warm, it's comforting, it's good to the soul because I'm spreading the good news of Jesus Christ. I am spreading the promises of God. And my hopes is that it will encourage you to go have a relationship of your own, not religion, with God, but to have a relationship with Him. If you don't have one, go seek Him out. And if you have one, strengthen it every single day. Secondly, let's talk about this switch up. Yes, I had to switch up my hair. It was time to let my scalp breathe. My scalp was so tender. So every now and again, I have to let my tresses out. And y'all, it was so much dead hair. And let me tell you something. Switching up is not a bad thing because sometimes we do have to switch up things. Sometimes we have to cut off the dead so that we can allow the growth to happen. So that's a good thing when you're switching it up. If you're doing it for a purpose of growth, or you're doing it in obedience to God, or you're doing it for the purpose of walking out the journey that God has for you. Switching up can also be to your detriment. And for a lot of us, we may see people who switch it up because it may be for selfish reasons, selfish gain. They are walking outside of the character that you know God has called them to. And then when this happens, that leads me to my third point. You stop trusting them because you don't recognize their person. You don't know who their person is. They don't look like what God told you about them. They don't look like who God created them to be. So now your trust is being challenged. But let me tell you something. God never asked you to trust in man. He never even told you to have people trust in you. He's like, I created you. I know the playbook. I know that you're going to switch it up. I know that you may test the waters and see if fat meat is greasy. No, you won't always switch up and make the right decision. That's why I don't want you to trust in people. I never told you that. I told you to trust in me. That's where your faith comes in. A lot of times you may hear people say, I have church hurt. Why? Because we trusted in the institution. We trusted in the pastor. God said you were going there to be amongst other people, to worship me, to learn about me. It was for you to go home, study my word, and find your trust in me, not in the church, not in the building, not in the people, not in the pastor, not in no one. I don't even want you to put the trust in yourself because you can't do anything in your own will outside of me, God says. So that's a lot of times where we find trust issues, where we are hurt, where we feel like, oh my God, I've been betrayed, because God say, let's check yourself. You misplaced your trust. I was reading his blog and it was really, really good. It's by Terra Sum Ministries. So, I want to share information because I love reading and researching. And when I see something good, I'm like, oh, let me tell them about it. She says the definition of trusting in God is a belief in God's truth, ability, and strength. Trusting in God is believing in God's truth, His ability, and His strength. To put it simply, trusting in God means believing what He says about Himself, about the world, and about you is true and unchangeable. Trusting is a choice. It is not a feeling. God is not going to force you to trust in Him. He's a gentleman. So you choose whether or not you're going to trust in people or you're going to trust in God. She also says, one thing for certain, God doesn't switch up. His word says God is not a man, so He does not lie. He is not human, so He does not change His mind. He has never spoken and failed to act. Has He ever promised and not carried it through? That's Numbers 23 and 19. Sometimes when we make decisions on whether or not we want to trust in God and trust in people, I think the reason that we trust in people because we want something tangible. We live in a very fast-paced world and we don't want to wait on God, because she asked a good question. Has his promises ever not carried through? For a lot of you all, you may say, yes, I haven't seen it yet. But it's because you're not trusting enough and being patient in the God that says, I have the right timing. There's some maturity and development. Heck, there's some things I'm trying to switch up in you before I just show you and give you the blessing, because I don't want you to be ungrateful. And I definitely don't want to give you something and you take the glory and you don't give me the glory. And that a lot of times is the reason why things don't happen right away. And then we go finding idols. We start trusting in idols and everything else around us because we can feel it, we can touch it, we can see it. But that's misplacing our trust. And that's why we end up hurt. That's why we end up disappointed. And that's why we end up pushing back saying, I'll never do that again. But if you read his word, he says, I'm not human. I don't do what humans do. I don't change my mind. My word has not changed from the time I created you, and it won't change to the end. If you read my word, you'll find out I'm the same God in the beginning that I was in the end. She goes on to say, something God has shown me is that in those moments of unbelief and distrust, I'm elevating my circumstances. I'm elevating my feelings. I'm elevating the world instead of the Creator. Think about that. When you don't trust God, like I just said, if you really think about your unbelief, you're elevating your unbelief. You're elevating the negative thoughts, the stinking thinking, as they would say. You're elevating your feelings. You're elevating the world instead of the Creator. So if you would check yourself and step back for a moment and say, no, God, I may not have seen it yet. Do I have stinking thinking? Do I have the wrong mindset? Am I not trusting you? Where have I placed my trust? We have to reevaluate and look at our circumstances, because we would love to point the finger at everything else around us instead of looking in a mirror and doing a self-check. One thing that I wrote in my own notes is that when we enter into friendships, relationships, whatever type of connection with people, it's not about trusting them. It's about trusting God and the wisdom he gives you. If the person doesn't have a reverential fear of God, if they don't place their desires below God, if they place their desires above God, then you can expect them to do things that can't be trusted because they don't fear God. They're walking in their own will. And so you can't put your trust in something, like I said, that will switch up, that changes, that is not founded on the rock, that doesn't have their mindset focused on the rock, the foundation. Their behavior shows that they don't trust God. So why would you trust them? When God shows you and exposes that, believe it. Trusting God means he will help you make the right decision. He will give you the wisdom of who to enter into relationships with, to enter into friendships with. You have to trust God first to direct you. I'll leave you with this. It says in the blog, I love how she ended this. God's not commanding us to ignore our feelings or what's happening around us. It is not pretending that everything is all right when it really isn't. He is not asking us to put our trust in ourselves, friends, family, or spouses. What he is commanding us is to acknowledge the realities of the world. Realize our need for him alone. Turn and believe in him. All right, y'all. I hope that was some good tea. Cheers. Now, if you're going to switch up, you better switch up for the good. Put your trust in God alone.